Welcome to Middle East Briefing. The content of the briefing includes: why Israel slept, China's Xi repeats call for ceasefire in Israel-Hamas war, Muslim country group to push for Gaza truce, Turkish source, Putin says BRICS could help reach political settlement in Gaza conflict, EU faces growing Muslim animosity over Gaza war stance, Borrell, why Israel slept, foreign affairs. In a surprising and devastating attack, Hamas militants infiltrated southern Israel and committed heinous crimes against Jewish people, resulting in the largest number of Jewish deaths since the Holocaust. The attack exposed the failure of Israel's security doctrine and the country's inability to keep its citizens safe. The Israeli government must now prioritize national security interests and work to eliminate the threat posed by Hamas and other adversaries, such as Hezbollah. Israel must also renew efforts to promote stable security and political arrangements with the Palestinians once the danger from Hamas has been eliminated. Israel's security doctrine, which includes deterrence, early warning, defense, and decisive victory, has been compromised due to an over-reliance on deterrence, a failure to properly comprehend Hamas's nature and intentions, and a lack of preparation for an above-ground invasion. The Israeli Defense Forces, IDF, must now focus on dismantling Hamas's military capabilities and achieving a decisive military outcome. Israel will require the support of partners who share its strategic interests, including the United States, European countries, and Arab states. The international community must provide military funding, humanitarian assistance, and support for reconstruction efforts in Gaza. Israel must also enhance its geopolitical alignment with the United States and its NATO allies and strengthen ties with India. Internally, Israel must work to restore normality in a traumatized society, rebuild devastated communities, and restore trust in the state's institutions. It should initiate a dialogue with Arab countries and international partners to establish an interim administration in Gaza and build the governing capacities of the Palestinian Authority. Despite the grim reality, there is hope that Israel can turn suffering and loss into peace and progress, as it did after the Yom Kippur War in 1973. The current situation presents an opportunity for Israel to reassess and enhance its security strategy and work towards a more stable and peaceful future. China's Xi repeats call for ceasefire in Israel-Hamas war. Bloomberg. Chinese President Xi Jinping has called for an immediate ceasefire in the conflict between Israel and Hamas at a summit organized by the BRICS group of nations. She stressed the need for an end to hostilities and a halt to the forced relocations and the targeting of people in Gaza. China plans to provide more supplies and assistance to Gaza in order to help the population. China has been hosting senior officials from Middle Eastern nations to discuss de-escalating the Israel-Hamas conflict and plans to visit Russia and the other permanent members of the United Nations Security Council to discuss the issue further. The discussions in China focused on stopping the military escalation in Gaza and delivering the necessary humanitarian aid to prevent a humanitarian catastrophe. The officials also reiterated calls for a two-state solution to achieve a peace deal between Israel and the Palestinians. Muslim country group to push for Gaza truce, Turkish source, Reuters. A group of senior officials from Muslim countries is visiting the United Nations Security Council's 5 permanent members to press for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza. The group was formed earlier this month at a summit of the Arab League and Organization of Islamic Cooperation, OIC, in Riyadh and includes representatives from Turkey, Qatar, Egypt, Jordan, Nigeria, Saudi Arabia, Indonesia, the Palestinian Authority, as well as the OIC Secretary-General. The group aims to secure a ceasefire and humanitarian aid for Gaza and contribute to a two-state solution. Turkish Foreign Minister Hakan Fidan did not participate in the group's visit to Beijing or Moscow but will join future legs of the tour. The group will meet with British Prime Minister Rishi Sunak and French President Emmanuel Macron during visits to Britain and France. Putin says BRICS could help reach political settlement in Gaza conflict. Reuters. Russian President Vladimir Putin has called for a political solution to the Israeli-Palestinian conflict and suggested that regional states and members of the BRICS group of countries could be involved in efforts to reach a settlement. Putin blamed the Middle East crisis on the failure of U.S. diplomacy in the region. He did not elaborate on how such an effort might be organized. The BRICS group includes Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. Russian and Western policy experts say Putin is trying to use the Gaza crisis to his geopolitical advantage as part of a strategy to court allies in developing countries and build what he calls a new world order to counter U.S. dominance. EU faces growing Muslim animosity over Gaza war stance, Borrell. Reuters. The European Union's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, has warned that the EU is facing growing hostility across the Muslim world and beyond due to accusations of pro-Israel bias and double standards over the war in Gaza. Borrell said that this animosity could undermine diplomatic support for Ukraine in the global south and the EU's ability to insist on human rights clauses in international agreements. He stressed that the EU must show more empathy for the loss of Palestinian civilian lives in Israel's war against Hamas, and that the EU needs to demonstrate that it cares about Palestinian lives. South Africa to chair emergency BRICS summit on Gaza crisis. RFI. Leaders from the BRICS countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa, will hold a virtual emergency meeting to discuss the situation in the Middle East, including the conflict between Israel and the Gaza Strip. The meeting will also include leaders from new BRICS members Saudi Arabia, Argentina, Egypt, Ethiopia, Iran, and the United Arab Emirates. The South African government has also requested an investigation by the International Criminal Court, ICC, into the war between Israel and Gaza and has called for an arrest warrant to be issued for Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. Israel and Hamas leadership make progress on hostage negotiations. ABC. Hamas leader Ismail Haniyeh stated that a truce deal between Hamas and Israel is close, whilst Israel's Prime Minister, Benjamin Netanyahu, said that progress was being made. The International Committee of the Red Cross also signaled that progress was being made, stating that its president met with Haniyeh in Qatar. Meanwhile, the UN warned that the fuel shortage and worsening sanitation in Gaza could cause a mass outbreak of disease, with serious consequences for children. UNICEF is particularly concerned about the risk of a cholera outbreak in the Gaza Strip. Noted Palestinian poet disappears in Gaza, family says. New York Times. Mozeb Abu Toha, a poet and essayist who founded the Gaza Strip's first English-language library, has gone missing after being stopped by the Israeli military as his family was fleeing to southern Gaza. PEN America, a free speech organization, said on Monday that Abu Toha had been detained by Israel. Israeli forces have taken over much of northern Gaza and ordered residents to move south as part of an air and land assault that followed the October 7 attack on Israel by Hamas. Yemen's Houthis release footage of gunmen seizing Israeli-linked ship. ABC. Houthi rebels in Yemen have released footage of the moment they seized an Israeli-linked cargo ship in the Red Sea. The gunmen rappelled onto the moving ship from a helicopter and took the 25 crew members hostage. The Houthis said they hijacked the ship over its connection to Israel and would continue to target ships linked to or owned by Israelis until the end of Israel's campaign against Hamas in Gaza. The ship's owner, Galaxy Maritime, said the ship is now in the Hodeidah port area in Yemen. The Red Sea is a crucial shipping route for global trade and energy supplies. Why calls for oil embargo on Israel are unlikely to go anywhere. Reuters. The current conflict in Gaza between Israel and Hamas has raised calls for an oil embargo against Israel by Iran and some other Middle East states. However, analysts and OPEC sources have dismissed the prospect of such an embargo. They argue that the oil market is very different today, with Asia, not the West, the main customer for OPEC's crude, and that the economic transformation in the Gulf region requires a lack of conflict. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Six, your resident observer from the 6 Degrees world. Today, we have discussed a range of news stories surrounding the conflict between Israel and Hamas. From the devastating attack by Hamas militants to the international efforts for a ceasefire and humanitarian aid, there are many factors at play in this complex situation. Israel's security doctrine has come under scrutiny, as it appears to have failed in preventing the recent attack. The Israeli government now faces the challenge of prioritizing national security interests and eliminating the threat posed by Hamas. This will require the support of strategic partners such as the United States, European countries, and Arab states. China has also called for an immediate ceasefire and plans to provide assistance to Gaza. The Muslim country group, including representatives from Turkey, Qatar, and Egypt, is pressing for a ceasefire and humanitarian aid. Russian President Vladimir Putin has suggested involving regional states and BRICS countries in reaching a political solution. The European Union, however, is facing criticism for its perceived pro-Israel bias, which is causing growing hostility across the Muslim world and beyond. This could have implications for the EU's diplomatic support for other issues, such as Ukraine. On the ground, progress is being made in hostage negotiations between Israel and Hamas, but there are concerns about the worsening humanitarian situation in Gaza. The fuel shortage and deteriorating sanitation could lead to a mass outbreak of disease, posing a significant risk to children. In Yemen, Houthi rebels have seized an Israeli-linked cargo ship, further escalating tensions in the region. Calls for an oil embargo against Israel have been raised, but experts believe this is unlikely to happen due to the changing dynamics of the oil market and the economic interests of Gulf countries. Overall, the situation in Israel and Gaza remains complex and volatile. It is crucial for all parties involved to prioritize the safety and well-being of civilians and work towards a peaceful resolution. As we continue to follow the developments, I encourage you, our viewers, to share your thoughts and ideas. What do you think about the international response to the conflict? Do you believe a lasting peace can be achieved? Let's discuss. Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.